What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today, it's Saturday, man. On Saturday next week, we could get the New York Giants drafting a quarterback, right? 1 week away from the Giants potentially landing. Maybe it's a developmental guy who only ever just becomes a backup. Maybe he becomes a starter. Who knows? But we're talking about day 3 of the draft on Saturday. That's what we're focusing in on today. Who are these mid to late round quarterbacks that the Giants could potentially target? Who have they expressed interest in? And who do we personally prefer out of this group? Now, when you're looking ahead to the draft, of course, we know that number 3 overall, it's still pretty much undecided. I think we all feel as though it's going to be Abdul Carter with the 3rd overall pick. But hey, they could surprise us. Maybe they trade down. Maybe they take Shedeur Sanders at 3rd overall. Totally, absolutely possible. But if they take Abdul Carter, as we all expect, which mid-round quarterbacks make the most sense for the New York Giants? That's the big topic of conversation in today's live stream that we're going to try our best to tackle, like Abdul Carter. So we're going to talk about the guys like Will Howard, like Kyle McCord, Jalen Milroe, of course, Jackson Dart. There's a bunch of them. Riley Leonard. It's a pretty deep quarterback class in terms of projects, I would say, in terms of developmental prospects in the middle rounds. So we're going to try our best to run through as many of them as possible, answer your questions as well for all of you in the live chat, and just have a good long discussion on who the Giants could target at the quarterback position on days 2 and day 3 of the NFL draft. So, Alex, how are you feeling today, my friend? And since we are under a week away from the NFL draft, are you starting to get really, really uncontrollably excited just like me?
Yeah, man, I'm doing pretty good, and I'm obviously very excited about the draft. We've been talking about it for so long now. I'm just happy to find out what the Giants do. We've heard the Sanders narratives. We're hearing the Abdul Carter narratives. We went through the Travis Hunter one for a week before the Cleveland Browns seemingly fell in love with him at his pro day. And now we're talking about mid-round quarterbacks because, listen, the Giants, and I'm not going to label Jalen Milroe a mid-round quarterback because I do think he goes much earlier than that. I think he is either an early second round or even at this point, a late first round pick. That's kind of what analysts are saying right now. I mean, Anthony, if you heard differently, it seems like he's going in that range.
Why? Why do you think he's going in the first round? Like, I want to tackle this. Why do you feel as though he's going to go in the first round?
Well, it's a good question. And I still think he has an astronomically long way to go as a passer, but I'll tell you what, he has an elite trait. And I'd argue many quarterbacks in this draft class don't. And people think it's projectable. People think he is projectable.
Okay, so that's true, but that was true 2 months ago when we said he was a 3rd round pick, right? Nothing changed other than he accepted an invitation to the NFL draft. Then all of a sudden, everybody started putting him in the first round. That shouldn't change anything, in my opinion. He is still a 3rd round prospect in my eyes, and I do not think he goes on night 1 and probably not even in the 2nd round of the NFL draft. I've changed my mind on this. I explained this in yesterday's upload, which obviously was solo, so you weren't there for this discussion, Alex, but I feel as though people are propping up Jalen Milroe as a potential first-round pick simply because he accepted an invitation to the NFL draft. So now everybody's assuming, oh, he must have gotten some assurances that he's going to be a first-round draft pick. When in reality, if you listen to what Jalen Milroe had to say, and I watched the interview where he discussed it yesterday, what did he say? He said, I just want the experience. If I get drafted on day 3, I'll be there for day 3. I just want my family to be there. I want to reward them for all of their hard work and celebrate my own and be there for all 3 days of the draft if that's what it takes. So that didn't sound to me like a guy who got assurances he's going in the first round. That sounds to me like a guy who's just proud of his hard work and wants to celebrate it with his family, whether that means he gets drafted on day 1, day 2, or day 3. So I think this narrative of him going at the back end of the first round is crazy. He is QB4 in this draft class at best, right? You've got Cam Ward as the obvious QB1. Shedeur Sanders is QB2 on most boards. Some of them even have Jackson Dart as QB2, but he's the consensus QB3. And then QB4 is Jalen Milroe, and that's not even consensus. Some people think Tyler Shuck might be QB4 or any of these other mid-round guys. So to me, I don't see a world where this guy goes in the first round. Maybe I'm wrong. It's totally possible he goes in the first round because somebody wants a 5th-year option, yada, yada, yada. I get it, but I really don't think he's going as early as people suggest. I think that he still is going to be a potential option for the Giants at the turn of the 2nd into the 3rd round with the number 65 overall pick.
Yeah, and that's kind of in line with what we were saying a couple weeks ago, in that Jalen Milroe, yes, he is a great quarterback in some ways, some respects. He has an elite trait, and teams probably love that about him, but he has a long way to go as an actual passer. Like, he needs a couple of years. Like, he needs the Jordan Love treatment, to be honest with you. And even so, like he may never get there. And Brian Dable, maybe he doesn't have that much time to go. But I think 2 years is a reasonable amount of time to invest in a mid-round quarterback if you think they have projectable traits, if you think they can get there. So if Brian Dable wins enough games this season and he has next year as well to work with Milroe, maybe it could make sense. But that's kind of what I said a couple months ago. Like I think he's a third-round pick in terms of where he's actually at. It's just this quarterback class is so weak that players like him are being valued astronomically different than they probably would have been last year. Jalen Milroe was a third-round pick with ease, in last year's draft. And now, because there's not that many options and we don't really know what Jackson Dart is and we don't really know what Tyler Shuck is, I think, there's a lot of uncertainty and people are projecting what he could be because there's a lot of teams need quarterbacks and there's not that many to pick.
In last year's class, Jalen Milroe would have been at best a third-round pick. You said third-round pick with ease. I think at best a third-round pick. I mean,
he easily would have been a third-round pick, like labeled a third-round pick instead of being considered by some of late first or early second.
Yeah, because we had most people thought Spencer Rattler was going to be a third-round pick. He went in the 5th round. Yeah. Joe Milton went in the 6th round. Last year, I don't even know. A
couple years back.
Malik Willis, a couple years back, he went in the 3rd round. So, and honestly, that's not a terrible comparison for Jalen Milroe. The only difference being one of them played at a fraudulent School of Liberty and the other one played in the SEC at Alabama. So obviously I would consider Jalen Milroe a more enticing option and a better prospect because of the competition that he faced. But in terms of their potential and their pros and their cons as a prospect, I don't know. I mean, when you look at Jalen Milroe, I just don't see how you can view him as a potential first rounder. Like, I think, again, as you said, in last year's class, at best, he's going in the 3rd round, but he's probably, in my opinion, more likely a 5th or 6th round pick last year. So if you want to go ahead and rip a first round pick on him, be my guest, but I'm not going to consider it a really good move. I'm going to consider it a massive reach, especially when you consider the amount of talent that's going to be on the board for the Giants around number 34 overall. And then they're trading up from there. I mean, listen, they could get a starting offensive lineman at 34, starting defensive lineman, maybe even a starting running back or wide receiver. They could get some serious talent with that pick rather than burning it on a super developmental, likely backup quarterback. So I don't know. I wouldn't touch Jalen Milroe unless he falls into the 3rd round personally at this point. I know that's a different stance than I had last week. I've changed my mind on this. I just don't think the value is there. And if you're not going to be convicted enough to take a quarterback at number 3, I don't want to reach on one and pass up all of the starting level talent at number 34 overall.
Yeah, I mean, again, it really depends on what Brian Dable thinks. If Brian Dable sees these traits and sees his weaknesses and says, well, I think I can fix these weaknesses, I don't mind the Giants spending the 2nd round pick on Milroe if Brian Dable feels that way. If he doesn't feel that way, there's no way I'm considering him until much, much later. So really, I'd have to know what he thinks. And I'd have to know how long it will take for him to actually get Milroe to a point of competency where we can trust him to potentially take over. So obviously we'll find out what that means. But like you said, there are starting level players at 34. And there are a lot of really good starting level players at 34, whether it be defensive tackle, you talked about Donovan Jackson, a lot recently. If he was to slip that far, wow, like great. There's a couple receivers like Egbuka. I know Lutheran. I don't think he'll fall that far, but if he did, like there's some really good talent. So the Giants would have to make a damn hard decision. Do you take a swing at a quarterback who needs a lot of work, or do you take a guy that's going to make an impact for you in year 1? So that's going to be probably something they face early on. But let's talk about Kyle McCord as a mid-round quarterback, Anthony. And I do want to preface this by saying, not everything when it comes to, actually investing in a mid-round level quarterback, they don't actually have to always become a starter. Backup quarterbacks are valuable in today's NFL. They're also expensive. Jameis Winston, he's making $8 million per season. Obviously some incentives. I meant with incentives. Like he could get up to $8 million, right? If he hits all of his incentives, but it's 4.
Only if he starts. He has to start games.
Only if he starts.
So
right. So let's just.
I don't think
we'll
he's going to start in a game. So $4 million per year.
So we'll assume it's just $4 million per year. Even if you have a backup that's competent, it's worthwhile. I mean, I guess Jameis Winston is probably the best backup you could get, and like that's pretty cheap to begin with.
I think better example though here for the financial is if you look over in Washington, Marcus Mariota makes $8 million per season as the backup, and I think that has incentives to go higher than $8 million. So backup quarterbacks. I mean, Daniel Jones technically signed on to be a backup / competitive fringe starter for the Colts and made $14 million in 1 year. So I agree with your point. I think it's super important to have young quarterbacks in the farm system basically developing to be potential backups. Because even if you're talking about the $4 million for Jameis, a 6th or 7th round backup quarterback is what, $1 million per season. So you are saving $3 million there, and that could be a starting guard depending on how you build your roster. So I think, you made a very good point there.
Yeah, I think that's valid. And, so looking in the mid rounds, though, at Kyle McCord, a lot of people, like every time we have a podcast, whether it's about the mid round quarterbacks or whether it's about something totally different, people clamor on about Kyle McCord. And one thing I read yesterday was that McCord said, of all the teams he's met with, the Giants put him through the toughest challenges, whether it be, just IQ based or whether it be physical based. Like, they ran him through the gauntlet. And Kyle McCord is coming from Syracuse. So let's be honest. The competition he's playing, they're not very good, right? He played Georgia Tech, he played Ohio, Stanford, Holy Cross, NC State, Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech, Boston.
I hate to keep jumping in on you, but he played in the same conference as Cam Ward, so he played the same.
No, and I know for sure, but different projectable traits, obviously. But he didn't play the best. But Cam Ward didn't play the best competition either, and that's something that we've acknowledged for sure.
True.
No.
Yeah. I've definitely acknowledged that, but
yeah,
we've also had a whole debate about the competition that Shedeur Sanders faced, and it's better than the ACC competition in my opinion, and so we could tie this into a whole larger conversation.
Sure.
But I think if you look at Kyle McCord's stats, though, he led the nation in passing yards. Like, he lit it up.
No, I was starting with that. I was going to get into his stats. Kind of right what you're talking about, 4,760 yards, 34 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He did have a 30.5% turnover worthy play percentage, which is a bit high, but I don't mind that in terms of, like, it's very high, but he's taking chances, taking shots. And, obviously Syracuse's playmakers are nowhere near how good they were with, like, Cam Ward in Miami, or even Sanders, who had elite receivers at the collegiate level against bad competitors.
He did play on Ohio State the year prior with the most elite talent, and he didn't look so good.
Yep. No, he didn't. 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 64.7% completion rate. So, yeah, like, he did not look as good. And he went to a worse school and looked a lot better, and probably, improved to a degree. But I think this is the true definition of a mid-round flyer. Like, when it comes to Kyle McCord, I don't visualize him ever becoming a starter. If he does, it would surprise me. However, you never know. Like, you really just never know with these players in the mid rounds. Like, sometimes you just strike gold, and the Giants are probably going to try to strike gold with one of them. But do you think that is a guy like Kyle McCord? Do you think that he has that level of potential upside, or do you think that maybe you would look in a different direction?
I freaking love Kyle McCord, dude. I think that he is a great option for the Giants in these middle rounds. He's got size, he's got strength, he's got the ability to navigate the pocket, he's got a strong arm. He played in a pro-style passing offense for Syracuse. Yeah, he didn't look so good at Ohio State, but I think that was a real learning lesson for him. He transferred, went to a different school, and maximized his talent. And if you listen to his interview recently this week, Alex, on the Rich Eisen show, he said that the number one question he's been asked every year was the transition from Ohio State to Syracuse. And he said that he really just had brutally honest conversations with himself, evaluated his own game film in a brutally honest way, and decided these are the changes that I need to make to my game. This is how I can improve. And he made those improvements. Now, he is a gunslinger. He takes a lot of chances. He is a little bit turnover prone. But hey, Josh Allen, Brian Dable, these are the things he likes. He likes a big, tall, strong quarterback who isn't afraid to throw the ball in the tight windows. Yes, might turn the ball over a little bit, but still has the ability to stand on the pocket, stand strong, and has some accuracy. I actually really do like Kyle McCord. I think of all the quarterbacks in the middle rounds, he does have the chance of being the one that the Giants potentially strike gold on, and being that developmental player who could be a starter one day. Like, that wouldn't be a shock to me. Obviously, it's not my expectation. I think the expectation is for him to be a solid backup, and I really do think he will be that. This is not a boom or bust prospect to me, though. I think he's got a pretty high floor considering the competition that he has faced in the past and the progression that he's made throughout his career, getting better as his collegiate career went on. And the way that I view the Ohio State thing for Kyle McCord, he played against some really good competition. Yes, he played with a lot of talent, didn't look so great. But the way that he battled back from that, the adversity, the ability to handle adversity, I think is really crucial. So he had that tough season at Ohio State. It didn't go as planned. He got replaced. He had to transfer. And instead of like giving up, he bounced back and fought way harder. And I think when we brought up Spencer Rattler earlier, right? Spencer Rattler had a very similar career path where he was at Oklahoma. He got replaced. Caleb Williams comes in, whatever. He has to go ahead and transfer. I don't think he got all that much better when he went to South Carolina. Like, he pretty much was the same player with the same strengths and the same weaknesses. Kyle McCord, on the other hand, yeah, did transfer to face some easier competition, so to speak, but made significant improvements in his game, became a much better player, and then led a high flying passing attack for Syracuse. I think his career path and his ability to fight through that adversity is entirely impressive and indicative of a player who can absolutely fight through more adversity and make something of a success for himself at the NFL level. So this is the guy in the middle rounds who has the most enticing career path to me. I think his career path is more exciting than Spencer Rattler's was last year. And I think when you look at tools and you look at traits, he has those as well. Plus, really high football IQ. I do really like Kyle McCord. This is the guy that I like in the middle rounds of the draft for the New York Giants.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to take him in the mid rounds, and you can take a flyer on a guy that has some good projectables. I think he's obviously an average athlete. I wouldn't call outside the pocket. His mobility is limited, but like you said, he's got a big arm, and he is a gunslinger. And Brian Dable loves guys who take chances, and sometimes he's a bit overzealous with those chances. But Kyle McCord, if you wanted to take a chance on him, maybe worthwhile. I mean, I saw the kind of gauntlet he was running with in the John Gruden thing, like camp of quarterbacks, whatever it was. And, John Gruden loves Kyle McCord. He's a good guy. He's a good kid. And I think that he fits well in terms of, like, he's ready to learn. And I think he learned a lot, like you just said, last year. So maybe there is more development, ready to happen, and the Giants can foster that. So he's also younger. Obviously Tyler Shuck is 26 years old and extremely injury prone. So yeah, his arm may be solid. He may have some nice plays, and he's, got a lot of good arm talent. It comes off the hand just very smooth and efficiently. But I do think when you're kind of looking at just the tangibles that come with him are kind of like the cons, the red flags. There's just too many of them for me to say he could develop into a starter one day. You really want someone who has that upside. Now, Kyle McCord is going to be more of a pocket passer, right? Like, he's going to be more of I would say more of a Joe Flacco-esque type of quarterback than he is going to be a mobile quarterback that's able to make stuff happen on the go. I'd say Flacco probably sounds a reasonable comp for him, which, by the way, like, Flacco in his prime was really freaking good. So I'm not saying he's going to become that, but if that was his career arc, I think the Giants would be pretty happy about that.
Yeah, the pro comp that Pro Football Focus's Trevor Sikkema had for Kyle McCord was Brock Purdy. And I think that was more so Brock Purdy coming out of college rather than Brock Purdy in the pros. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a pretty good comparison as well. I'd say Kyle McCord has a little bit more size to him, and Brock Purdy probably has a little bit more athleticism and mobility than McCord does. But I think from a playing style standpoint, being an aggressive pocket passer who sometimes puts the ball in harm's way in search of the bigger play, that does sound like Brock Purdy to me. So yeah, I think there's a lot to like with McCord. Before we continue this chat, I know you got something to say, but I want to just get to the super chat for Christian Whitehead, because he's been waiting on it for a second here for us to give him the shout out. And Christian, we really do appreciate you. Longtime Fireside Giants viewer. Said appreciate y'all's constant flow of content. Love tuning in. Can't wait for the draft. I hope we get Hunter. Man, you and me both. I hope somehow we get Travis Hunter, but unfortunately, I think that dream is dead. And hey, I can't be upset if we draft a potentially elite all-pro pass rusher in Abdul Carter. I'll be happy with that as well. But yeah, I can't wait for the draft. Definitely appreciate you tuning in to all of the content that we have been flowing, Christian. And make sure that you tune in on the night of the draft, because I will be live probably for a grand total of like 5 hours or something. It's going to be a wild ride, but I'm really excited for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Christian, really appreciate the super chat. We're trying to get as much content out as possible every single day leading up to the draft. We'll do probably I think Anthony has something planned for a whole 7-round mock, but looking at McCord just one last second, the last thing I'll say about him, Anthony, is I think Lance Zierlein had a pro comp for him of Mitch Trubisky. Also kind of interesting. I think Trubisky's a little bit more athletic than him, but again, not really mobile. I'd say he can make his way out of the pocket, but he's not going to beat you with his legs all the time. So not a bad comp.
I don't think it's a bad comp either. And I think people will hear that and be like, ooh, if his comp is Mitch Trubisky, I don't want anything to do with him. But I think it's important to contextualize this and remember, coming out of college, Mitchell Trubisky was a top 2 pick in the draft. Like, the kid had potential coming out of UNC. He just didn't go to the best situation, and they didn't maximize it. Now, he shouldn't have been a top 2 pick. I never thought he was that caliber of prospect, but he did have some flashes early on in his career. Went to a Pro Bowl, technically. Did go to the playoffs with the Bears one season. Trubisky had some stuff coming out, and I just don't think it was realized and properly developed. But we're talking about a mid-round pick, not somebody that would take top 2 overall with a Mitch Trubisky comp. We're talking about somebody we'd take in round 4 at like pick 105 with a Mitch Trubisky comp, which is realistically where Trubisky should have been drafted and had those tools and time to develop those tools. So I don't hate that comp because I think that if you're getting a Trubisky-esque player right now, well, if he's got a full year to sit behind Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and be coached by Mike Kafka and Brian Dable, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, I think that Trubisky comp could evolve and he could become a pretty solid player. So, yeah, I really do like Kyle McCord, Alex. I think that, I don't know if I would draft him in the top 100, but with that 105th pick that the New York Giants have at the top of the 4th round, sounds like a pretty good spot to take a chance on Kyle McCord. If there is a quarterback run, maybe you take him a little bit earlier, but I think around that 105 range, that's where he probably makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. Now, I want to talk about one of the more maybe polarizing quarterbacks in this draft class, a guy that nobody really talked about this kind of draft process, and we haven't talked about him at all, and that's Quinn Ewers. And I don't really know if I want anything to do with Quinn Ewers. However, this was once thought to be like one of the top quarterback prospects in the country, just a year ago. Like going into this season, everyone thought he was going to light it up. Obviously, that did not happen with Texas. However, this guy has some marquee wins on his book, obviously against Alabama and Michigan over the last 2 years. But the biggest concern with Quinn Ewers is that he doesn't read the field extremely well, and he is sometimes predetermining his targets, very Daniel Jones-esque. But he's got a quick release. He throws a tight spiral. Like he can do a lot of those fundamental stuff. Can he read the field and get through his progressions efficiently at the NFL level? That is the question, that many people are asking. Will he translate? I do think his upside is interesting because that talent is there. Like we've seen flashes of what he could be, but he's never put it together for a full season. Do you think that maybe if you're taking a mid-round flyer on a quarterback, a guy with that level of upside is someone you want just sitting, learning, baking in the oven, and maybe taking over for a chance? You think Ewers is not someone we've talked about much, but someone I do think is interesting.
He's interesting, but everything you just described there, showing the flashes, never putting it together for a full season. Are you talking about Quinn Ewers? Or are you talking about Daniel Jones? And honestly, you'll watch some of the highlights and the lowlights of Quinn Ewers, and I see a lot of Daniel Jones on his film. There's the same strengths and the same weaknesses. I'll say the strengths, Ewers has a stronger arm, I think, than Jones did coming out of college. Maybe marginally, because Jones probably did have a little bit of an underrated arm coming out. People talked about him like he had a noodle, and I never think that was the case. But Ewers does have a pretty strong arm, and he's got some decent mobility. Maybe Jones was a better athlete than him. Again, probably marginally. The one thing that I'm going to say, though, in defense of Quinn Ewers, he played this entire past season with a torn oblique, and obviously that affects the way that you play. He got injured, I think it was like week 1, 2, or 3, sometime in the early portion of the season, tore his oblique, just hung in there, played through it. And I think that has caused a lot of NFL teams to reevaluate him and his film and say, maybe some of his lack of mobility, like Dr. Pancake here saying Ewers is less mobile than DJ. He definitely is less mobile than Daniel Jones was, for sure. Daniel Jones was a better athlete. But at the same time, Ewers this past season was kind of forced to stay in the pocket because he had a torn oblique. And I don't know how you run upfield and make some moves and hard cuts with that. So, maybe NFL teams are reevaluating him and saying, hey, that talent, as you mentioned, Alex, at one point he was viewed as a top talent in the country and had the potential to be something special. Never realized that potential. But, potentially could that have just been a result of playing through injuries and maybe in a better situation, in a healthier situation, could he be something more special than what he was? And so, of course, with the New York Giants now having some bridge quarterbacks in place, could they take the time to wait on a Quinn Ewers? I think it's something that's interesting to think of. Again, he's got a strong arm, but he really doesn't read the field well. And I think the number one thing for me, Alex, that I don't like about Quinn Ewers whenever I watch him, he doesn't seem to navigate the pocket well. His pocket presence just isn't so strong in my estimation of him. I think he really struggles to sense the rush and to escape on collapsing pockets, or to stay in them. If they're collapsing here, move over here, just shift and find that extra space. And that was always my biggest gripe with Daniel Jones. He never knew where the rush was coming from and how to navigate the pocket. And I think that's my biggest gripe with a lot of the worst quarterbacks that we watch across the NFL. It's always a matter of pocket presence and an inability to sense pressure and make a move to create some more space for yourself. So in that regard. I think that's where Quinn Ewers really struggles. And ultimately, that's why I'm probably not interested in the New York Giants drafting him, even if it is in the middle rounds of this year's draft.
Yeah, and listen, the last quarterback that really we would probably consider, aside from Milroe, Shuck, and Ewers, is Will Howard from Ohio State. And Will Howard is talked about, interestingly, as like the worst of the bunch by, if you're talking about NFL.com and their draft profiles of him. Like they have him labeled as a backup, like with, he could develop, but they have him really as a backup quarterback with no chance to develop into a starter. And I think that's kind of crazy, kind of interesting. And the question is why? Well, I don't really know. Ohio State, he had 72.8% completion rate with a 35 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like these things translate all the time to the NFL because they don't. And that's my argument for Shitter Sanders, is that the stats don't always matter. But why is Will Howard so far down on this list? Why is no one considering him a mid-round project? You guys can give me your answers in the comment section. But, Anthony, what do you think about Will Howard? Is he someone that you're like, I wouldn't touch him, I'd rather go with somebody else? Or do you think there's anything there?
You're saying no one views him as a guy that the Giants should consider in middle rounds. Well, let me correct you real quick, because obviously when I was doing my solos last week, you missed out on all of the great Will Howard discourse that we were having and all of the great conversations that I was having centered around how much I like Will Howard in the middle rounds. And big shout out to a major supporter of the channel, Cam Simpson, who adamantly messaged me and said, you have to watch Will Howard right now because that's my steal of the draft. So shout out to you, Cam Simpson, whether you're tuned in today or not. I know that you'll watch the live stream replay regardless. He put me on the Will Howard, and he made me realize that this is a kid with a lot of talent. And honestly, Alex, when you look at Will Howard's build, but just the archetypical build of a quarterback, Will Howard's got that plus the athleticism. I mean, 6'4", 236 pounds. He's built like a brick house, and he can move. That is, we always make these comparisons. Everybody always, because Brian Daboll's our head coach, we like to say, oh, this guy's got that Josh Allen build. This guy's got that Josh Allen build. Will Howard actually does have the Josh Allen build, right? I'm not saying he's Josh Allen's talent. I'm just talking about the physical build of Will Howard. He's very tall, he's very heavy, and he's very strong, and he's athletic. So if you're looking at him as that mid-round project for some time, I think that you could see him develop into something. Now, the knocks against him, the reason why, you mentioned the stat line, and you're saying, oh, it might not translate. The reason people feel that way is because he played at Ohio State, and the amount of talent that was surrounding Will Howard last season was utterly ridiculous, right? He just had every all-star prospect that you could think of in the world to throw the ball to or hand the ball off to as well, because that backfield was stacked with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, who obviously the New York Giants have had a top 30 visit with and they're interested in. Will Howard had a lot of help around him, essentially, is the point that I'm trying to make. But what I will say in counterpoint to that, we just discussed this man right here, Kyle McCord, right? And Kyle McCord was unable to maximize that Ohio State talent just a year prior. And he had Marvin Harrison Jr. to throw to. So Will Howard stepping in, no MHJ, but yes, a really good team around him, did actually maximize the talent. So I think there is a lot to like with Will Howard. His arm strength, his mobility, his ability to play with talent around him. I like Will Howard. That is a guy that I do foresee being an intriguing developmental pick in the middle rounds of this year's draft, regardless of who ends up taking him. But if it is the New York Giants, I think he's a perfect marriage with Brian Daboll.
Yeah, I mean, I would be really interested to see what he could do with him because, like you said, he's got a little bit of mobility and he's worked with some really good players. And yeah, like Ohio State, like you said, the offense, the receivers, the running backs, there's just an embarrassment of riches there. But Quinn Ewers had a couple really good pieces too, and still couldn't leverage them. And it's sometimes a quarterback struggles in that environment, and Will Howard did not. Like, he went and won a national championship. Like, he went and performed exceedingly well. He's one of those guys that, like, based on just the analysts reading what they're saying about him, I could totally see him beating expectations. Like someone said, like Dr. Pancake said in the chat, he might be in the league for a long time, even if it's as a competent backup, just stepping in and being able to operate an offense. Like, that's a valuable asset to have. But I do think Will Howard, and I'll ask you this, Anthony, because I think now that we've gone through the primary bunch of mid-round to third to fifth round quarterbacks that could be taken in this draft class, how would you rank the guys we've mentioned so far? Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers, Will Howard, Tyler Shuck, and I feel like I missed one. Did I miss one? Kyle McCord. Those five.
That's a fun question, and you're putting me on the spot here. You didn't even say your take on it. You're just like, let me get your take.
I figured I'd give mine after.
That's fine.
I can give mine first if you want. I can give mine first.
No. It's fine. All right. Tyler Shuck is at the bottom. I'm going to say this. Let me get this one out of the way. If the New York Giants spend a top 100 pick on Shuck, I'm going to lose my freaking mind on this live stream. Like, if it's day 2 of the draft, it's pick number 65 overall, and Tyler Shuck comes across my screen, you guys are going to be in for a freaking treat. I almost just cursed there. You guys are going to be in for a treat. You will hear some cursing on this live stream if that happens. So Tyler Shuck's at the bottom of this list for me. I want nothing to do with this kid. I don't like his mechanics. I don't like his ability to play under pressure. I don't like his ability to throw from the pocket. The only thing I like about him are his highlights, which mean nothing to me. You know what I learned more about a quarterback from, Alex? Lowlights. How low are your lowlights? And how ridiculous are your lowlights? Do you have the most stupid, brain-dead Will Levis type interceptions on your film, such as Tyler Shuck, or do you not? And if you don't, I like you. And if you do, I don't like you. And that's why I don't like Tyler Shuck. He has some of the most brain-dead football plays that I have ever seen. He will just throw it up underhanded and hope that somebody catches it. And you know who catches it? The other team. And this is not a situation where it's like Eli Manning would make some brain-dead throws during his NFL career, and you live and you die by it, and he would win you some games. That is not the case here. Tyler Shuck is nowhere in that realm or stratosphere of player. He is an injury-prone, old rookie quarterback with an unreal ability to turn the ball over in crucial moments and make some brain-dead, stupid plays. So I want nothing to do with Tyler Shuck. He's at the bottom of this list for me. Don't take him to the top 100 pick. If you take him in the 6th or the 7th round, fine, whatever. I still don't like it, but I'm just not a fan. I know he played in a pro-style offense. He was under center. He's got the build. He's got the athleticism. All those things are true. A lot of people in this world have the build and athleticism of an NFL quarterback. Doesn't mean they'll be a good one, all right? I'm not putting that much stock into it. What we've seen from Tyler Shuck has never been impressive, despite him being hailed as this next big thing 8 freaking years ago. I mean, where were we 8 years ago? Think about how much has changed in that time. A lot has changed for Tyler Shuck as well. So, of these guys you mentioned, Tyler Shuck's at the bottom. Who's at the top? Let's go there. I want to say it's probably Jalen Milroe for me. I have been higher on Jalen Milroe throughout the pre-draft process than I think you have, Alex. And I think that a lot of Giants fans, because I've always seen potential there in the way, not just because of his elite athleticism and rushing ability, which is what everybody always brings up. He's got the trait that you can't teach. He's got that athleticism. Really what it is for me with Jalen Milroe is when I watch him and I watch the All-22, I actually do see a quarterback who knows where to go with the football. He just mechanically doesn't have it right, and he can't accurately throw the football. But I think he sees the field well, and I think he's got gamesmanship, and I think he's obviously got the rushing ability. That's a guy who has legitimate tools and traits. So Jalen Milroe is probably going to be at the top for me, then Kyle McCord, then Will Howard, and who else? Anybody else? Am I missing anybody? Obviously, Tyler Shuck is in he's like at bedrock. Okay, Ewers and then Shuck, because I don't like Ewers as much as. So I'll go Milroe, I'll go McCord, I'll go Howard, I'll go Ewers, and I'll go Shuck.
Okay, so I would go with Milroe just because he has that elite trait. If he didn't have the legs, obviously he'd probably be towards the bottom anyway. I'm actually going to go with Will Howard at second. He gives me some of those Brock Purdy vibes where neither of their arms are necessarily strong, but they're just tough as nails and they're willing to do whatever it takes. And, I know that Will Howard had a lot of great talent, but guys in the NFL, we see quarterbacks with great talent not get them the football. You know what I mean? Like Daniel Jones. How often did Daniel Jones just literally fail to get his playmakers the football? I think that, it's a skill to be able to maximize your talent. I mean, think about last year with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray. They were rarely on the same page for games at a time. They failed to get him the ball. And now that might have been Marvin's fault at times because he obviously looked a little lackadaisical sometimes out there, but maybe it was schematics. But I do think that Will Howard does a great job getting the ball to his best players. And, that is essential. It's critical in the NFL. I mean, look what Sam Darnold just did with Justin Jefferson. And Jordan Addison, that whole offense ran through those two guys. No one else mattered. It was those two guys and nothing else. If those two guys were not producing, the Vikings were not winning. So I do think that if you can get the ball to your playmakers at a high and efficient level, you are going to be a decent quarterback. You're going to be okay. You can survive. Will Howard, I think, has a lot of decent traits, and I do think his ability to escape the pocket, do things on the move, that does stand out to me. And the high completion percentage, if you're gonna rope Shedeur Sanders into that same kind of category, he's super accurate, you have to do it for Will Howard too, because both of those guys had elite receivers, and one of them played against much better competition. So I do think that I'm not saying that obviously Will Howard is a top 10 pick in the draft. What I am saying is that I do think that that same argument can be used if you're going to use it for one of those players. After Will Howard, so far I have Milroe, I have Will Howard. Then I'm going to go with Kyle McCord because, I do like his frame. I do like his arm. I do think he's a gunslinger. And I do think Brian Dable likes that about Kyle McCord. And then I'm going to go same with you, Quinn Ewers, and then obviously Tyler Shuck at the bottom because 26 injury prone. If he was 22 and injury prone, I'd be like, all right, maybe he's just young. He can shake it off, but he's 26. He's so old. By the time he's done with that 4-year contract, he's going to be 30 years old, and you're not going to be able to extend him because he's going to be heading towards the back end of his career at that point because he'll probably have gone through multiple injuries. So, I do think that I would avoid that kind of situation. He probably is a late one. But Anthony, I was kind of looking at some draft profiles of past quarterbacks. Brock Purdy, you know what his draft grade was from NFL? Undrafted free agent. That's what they had him as. I mean, he was the last pick in the draft, obviously, so that was probable. Yeah, but he was labeled a UDFA, and they said he was inconsistent, and he didn't have the strongest arm, and he didn't have all these things. He just wasn't. He never got better from his earlier days in college. So I do think it gives me a lot of Will Howard vibes in some ways. I do think Will Howard played at a much better school, obviously, but I do think neither of them have crazy good arms, but they do maximize their best talent. And they do certain things very well. And Brock Purdy does escape the pocket and does make throws on the run and does those. He's willing to dive for a first down and move the chains with his legs. I know I see some similarities there.
Yeah, I think that I guess I see those similarities, but I see more similarities between Brock Purdy and Kyle McCord, honestly. I think that that's a better comp. Will Howard has so much more size and mass to his frame than Brock Purdy does, so I think
he does.
It's a little bit
different. I think McCord's arm is better than both, though.
Yeah, McCord can rifle it.
Yeah, he can rifle. That's the only reason I'm a little bit like Will Howard and Brock Purdy because they both have weaker arms, but their placement's really good, and they when they're in rhythm they can get it going. So that was just the arm strength I was kind of comparing.
I think Howard's got a pretty strong arm, in my opinion. I think Purdy's got a much stronger arm than people give him credit for either way. So we've always had these debates. I'm higher on Brock Purdy than most people, so I really like Brock.
I mean, Purdy. I love Brock Purdy. I think he's a great player. He's very instinctual in rhythm. He's unstoppable when he gets going. It's when he starts to throw interceptions and when he starts to get broken up and defenses get to him, then he starts to fall apart. But that's usually the case with most quarterbacks.
That's the case with Kyle McCord. That's why I like the Kyle McCord comp, because that's exactly what it is. He's a gunslinger, and he'll turn the ball over and then maybe unravels. But before we continue our quarterback discussion, we do have a super chat here. And if you can't tell, I'm teasing a little something here. Philip Santana, appreciate the super chat, saying, okay, serious question. When will Tibosaurus Rex come back? When he was out there, we were winning. How about right now, man? How about right now? Tibosaurus Rex is here in every single Fireside Giants episode. He just doesn't make the appearance on camera because he's always right here on my desk. And oftentimes I'll be sitting here going on these angry rants about how much I dislike Tyler Shuck, and I'll just be petting Tibosaurus Rex on my desk, just hanging out. We're just buddies, But here's Tibosaurus Rex back on the live stream. I know you've all missed him. I definitely need to make it a point to put him on camera more often because you're right. It was during the 2022 season where Tibosaurus Rex was appearing probably in just about every single Fireside Giants episode, and the New York Giants went on to win a freaking playoff game. So Tibosaurus Rex is making a comeback. I think what happened with Tibosaurus Rex, Alex, we've had some conversation. We've had some discussions. He got a little camera shy once Daniel Jones was established again as a starting quarterback. He was like, I can't support this team right now. I'm a little bit too upset. I don't want to be on camera. I'll watch from afar, but I don't want to be on the camera. But now that Russell Wilson is back, so is Tibosaurus Rex. Or not back, but now that he's here, Tibosaurus Rex is back now that we have a quarterback. So welcome him back, Alex. Tibosaurus Rex is one of us again.
Pro saw Joshi and gave him that contract. I said, I want nothing to do with your podcast, is what really happened. But I'll tell you what. So a little side quest here. I was doing some research on the running backs, or at least one running back in Judkins today from Ohio State. Obviously, you mentioned him earlier, and a lot of people mentioned him to me and was like, check this guy out. You have to check out Judkins. You know what his pro comp is, right? And I think this is a pretty interesting player because it is different than Tyrone Tracy completely. But I do think the Giants could benefit from having a player like this. Who, do you know who his pro comp is? Or at least there's a pretty good one I think that, you'll like. No?
Who?
Okay, so his pro comp is Joe Mixon, and I like
I
the Joe
like that.
Mixon pro comp. Yeah, I like the
Comp.
Joe Mixon pro comp because I think that Judkins could handle like 20 carries a week and do it with no problem. Like he's got that physicality. He's got really good contact balance. He ran a 4.48 40-yard dash. Like he doesn't have that like second gear that's going to push him over the edge in terms of speed, but 4.48 is fast. And I do think that that's a player I could see, stepping into a pretty big role for the Giants as like probably your workhorse back. And then Tyrone Tracy can be kind of a change of pace, third down back receiver where he actually kind of, I think, would flourish. I like Tracy a lot, and I think that he could be kind of a workhorse too. But he picked up a couple injuries last season in that role that kind of concerned me. That I don't think that they can lean on him like that. He never handled a workload like that at Purdue, and I think that may be some part of the reason why the Giants leaned on him pretty heavily when Devin Singletary was fumbling every freaking day. And they were like, "All right, Tracy, like you're getting 16 plus carries," and he had some fumbling issues. He dropped a lot of passes. Like he was picking up some injuries down the stretch. I think the Giants could use a nice like David Montgomery, Joe Mixon style running back that can just bruise. Like he's going to take hits. He's going to deliver hits. That's kind of why I like Cam Scatterbo as well. But like those two guys, Judkins, Scatterbo, like they just deliver hits and they're physical and elite contact balance. What do you think about that? Like, I think that the Giants could use a player like that could just grind out defenses and just make them pay. Cause that is something that we've kind of missed over the last couple of years.
You know what's another thing we've missed? And this is kind of like not a super important thing, but it can be pass protection from the running back position, right? Like I think Saquon Barkley early in his career really struggled as a pass protector, but as the years went on, it became a major strength in his game. And it was very crucial for the New York Giants, especially when considering how bad the Giants' offensive line was. Quinshon Judkins, at least from what I've seen, is pretty good in that regard. He can step up in the pocket and lay some hits on blitzers. So I think that's another underrated selling point. And maybe it's one of the reasons why the Giants did have Quinshon Judkins in for a top 30 visit. Maybe they're viewing him as this guy who really can be the perfect complement, can get involved in the receiving game, can be the ugly yardage Joe Mixon guy that you mentioned. But also, as Joe Mixon's really good at pass protection, maybe they view that for Quinshon Judkins as being a guy who can help them keep their pocket clean. I think that's really, really important. So what's your take on that? Do you also view that as I think it's an undervalued trait for running backs to be able to contribute in pass protection?
Well, there's not many running backs that actually contribute that much in pass protection these days. So, Joe Mixon is one of those guys that he does it well. Like he's a good pass protector. And the Giants, like Tracy had problems last year. Singletary, he's had a couple decent blocks, but I don't think that his future here long term is set in stone at all. I would love a player that can just grind out yards. He's going to pick up, first downs for you on the chains, and he's going to do the dirty work. And he's going to be a good red zone, like running back, like shorten, obviously like first and short on the goal line. You want him in there. Judkins, if he can also pass protect, think about the importance of that. If he gets better as a rookie, you drop a young quarterback into that situation, you're running back and pass protect. That's going to help your young quarterback so freaking much, knowing that if there's a guy coming off the edge and my running back has to step in there and do his job, he's going to do it, and he's going to do it well. He's not going to get absolutely blasted or absolutely worked around. That is a nice insurance policy. So I do think that, the Giants like could use a piece like that. And I think Judkins is like a pretty good role player in that way, but they need a bruiser. Like I do think like that should be the Giants' identity on offense, bruising and bullying opposing defenses, like making them pay, and then using that as leverage to open up your passing game via the play action and the deep ball. Like if you're just grounding and pounding, like just not like Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw, like you guys remember that, obviously. What Brandon Jacobs did to teams and what it opened up for guys like Victor Cruz, what opened it up for guys like Hakeem Nicks, Plaxico, like all that type of ground and pound game, that is so important. And I think that you saw the Lions do it last year with Jameson, how they opened up the offense with Jameson Williams, how they opened it up for Jahmyr Gibbs when Jordan Montgomery was on that field and he was bruising linebackers, bruising safeties. Like it really just exposed a whole level of playbook that the Giants haven't had access to in a long time. So, I think that linebackers, like, you're going in to deliver a hit, you're getting a hit back. You know what I mean? It's not like these running backs are shying away or they're smaller or more elusive. Like you are actually getting shoulder to shoulder impact. Like you're going in there knowing you're going to have to deliver. So I do think the Giants should be a part of the identity. And it's been something that's been missing for a long time.
If you like bruising running backs, the Giants have expressed a lot of interest in two of them. Damian Martinez out of Miami, who's honestly built similarly to Brandon Jacobs,
Yeah.
and they met with him at the pro day, and Ollie Gordon the second out of Oklahoma State, who is
Hmm.
built like a brick house, as I love to use that phrase, because he's an absolute bruiser as well. And the Giants had a top 30 visit with him, so I think he might be onto something. Of the running backs that the Giants have visited with, they've all kind of been powerful running backs, like Martinez. Scatterbo is a powerful guy as well. So they've definitely expressed some interest in some guys who have some physicality in the background. But before we continue our discussion on the running backs, I want to get the Sam Fountain super chat here. Sam in here in another live stream. Sam, you're here all the time. We appreciate you so much. You're the best, man. Fireside Giants, OG day one. So Sam saying, hi guys, can you see us taking a linebacker in round 3 or 4? Our depth is very thin there. I don't think this linebacker class is good enough to spend a top 100 or 105 pick on personally. Especially if they do end up taking Abdul Carter at number 3. I think they're going to view him as an upgrade, yes, on the edge as a pass rusher, but also as a linebacker since he has the versatility and experience of doing both. So I don't think the Giants would go linebacker early enough, like round 3 or 4. I think more so round 6 or 7 is probably where they take their linebacker, which seems to be what they've done in the past as well. They spend a lot of those late round picks on linebackers, pretty much with the hope of these guys contributing on special teams, but having the upside to maybe get involved with the defense at some point. Additionally, I think that they do like the linebackers that they have. The depth there isn't spectacular, but Bobby Okereke is a good starter, and so is Micah McFadden. And behind him, they do really like certain guys that they have. Deontay Johnson, I know they like a lot, who's dealt with injuries, obviously, but Darius Muasau, who I know that they also really like, and they have some guys on their practice squad as well. So I don't think the depth there is spectacular. The starting two and Okereke and McFadden is really solid in my estimation. But I think that round 3 or 4, there's going to be some other positions with far more talent that the Giants are going to cater towards instead.
Yeah, Sam, appreciate the super chat a ton. Linebackers, they always like to add one, but I think that I wouldn't even rule out a UDFA. Like they do like to grab some UDFA guys, stash them for a later day. We've drafted a lot recently. You mentioned Deontay Johnson, he's UDFA. Obviously, Micah McFadden's a guy there, and Muasau was a late round pick. So maybe they spent like a 6th. I don't even think do we have a 6th this year or not? We don't, right? So we don't have a 6th, maybe a 7th, maybe even a 5th. Who knows? Depends, where they take a running back. But I do think like you can never rule it out. Having linebackers, you never really know when you're going to strike gold on one of those guys because they're just sometimes underrated and under evaluated. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did take a linebacker. Just a matter of when. But yeah, I think that's kind of my take on the linebacker situation.
And I think it's a solid take. It's very similar to the one that I gave. So we are on the same page here with the linebackers. Now, moving on to the next super chat here from Michael Russ. Appreciate you so much, Michael, saying, like the idea of Milroe if he fell to the 3rd, but Dillon Gabriel could be the steal of the draft. Alex, do you have a take on Dillon Gabriel? For me, I'm not the biggest fan because I don't really like lefty quarterbacks. I know that's kind of an overrated talking point. Some people don't mind, whether you throw with your left hand, your right hand, or your toes, doesn't matter to some people. But to me, it kind of matters because I just don't think there are a lot of successful lefty quarterbacks. But more so than anything, I don't care if he throws left or right. I care about his size because what is he? Isn't he like 5'11"? Isn't Dillon Gabriel he's really undersized? Obviously, he did play for Oregon, put up a lot of yards, had some good playmakers around him. But it's a little tough to evaluate Oregon quarterbacks sometimes because they play in such a system. Like Bo Nix coming out last year when he was playing at Oregon was in such a system. And so it was hard to get a good evaluation on him. And that's why the Broncos were the perfect fit for him because they ran a system for him and built a scheme around Bo Nix. I feel like with Dillon Gabriel, you kind of need to do the same thing. You have to have a scheme built around him, especially because he is so short and he is so undersized. That takes away a lot of options for you over the middle of the field. I see comments on Fireside Giants comment sections all the time, Alex, where fans are saying, listen, I'm excited about Russell Wilson. He could throw the deep ball, but he can't throw over the middle of the field because he's not tall enough. And that's always been a weakness for him. And Giants fans aren't necessarily wrong when they make that criticism of Russell Wilson. He doesn't throw that effectively over the middle as opposed to when he's throwing outside the numbers. And I think that would be the same issue you would see from Dillon Gabriel. I think it's the same issue that you do see with Kyler Murray. Struggles to hit those shots over the middle of the field oftentimes and prefers to throw to the outside. So Gabriel, the reason why he's going to be a late round draft is because of limitations. And you don't want to draft developmental quarterbacks who are limited. You'd rather get a guy like Milroe if he fell to the third, as this super chat suggests, because he's unlimited. He's got potential. And guys like Will Howard and Kyle McCord have that height, have that strength. Maybe it's mobility. There's an unlimited aspect to them. But with Dillon Gabriel, there's a lot of flaws and weaknesses and limitations in his game that you have to find a way to work around. So ultimately, he wouldn't be my selection for the Giants. I don't think that he makes a ton of sense. And I think that he needs way more development than what the Giants have allotted to them in terms of time to develop a quarterback prospect. So for me, not crazy about Dillon Gabriel, but you're not the only fan of his. I've got a friend, Willie, who I'm actually about to see in a little bit later on today. He loves Dillon Gabriel. He also thinks he's going to be the steal of the draft. So if you feel that way, I can't blame you. It's just not necessarily my preference.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, he's smaller, he's older. A lot of people say his throws die. So like, I do think like there are some intriguing things, like extremely productive, tons of poise. Has a pretty good feel for it to go, with the football on any given play. But it's just, there's just some problems that he can't help. Like there's some problems he can't fix. Like why is Jalen Milroe so high on people's boards, or, even considered in the top two rounds of the draft? Well, because he can run like crazy, and because he's big, and because he has potential to fix some of those issues. Dillon Gabriel can't grow anymore, right? He's too old. He's not growing anymore. His arm isn't getting much stronger. So like there are problems to his game that simply are intangible traits he has no control over. Now that doesn't mean he can't be successful. I mean, Russell Wilson overcame those problems. Even Brock Purdy was a little bit of a interesting physical specimen coming out, but he's a little bit taller than I originally thought. There have been shorter quarterbacks that have panned out for sure. Baker Mayfield was a guy they were concerned about his height as well, and look what he's doing right now. So you can't rule out anybody from becoming good. I'm not going to say he's going to be bad because I just don't know. But there are limitations that are forcing him down the board that NFL teams think are worthwhile. Being a lefty, obviously, we paid a left tackle a lot of money to be the blindside protector for our right-handed quarterback, and then we're going to change that. And, obviously that wouldn't be ideal either. Andrew Thomas becomes a lot less valuable in that system. Jermaine Illuminor now becomes the blindside protector, and that's obviously assuming Dillon Gabriel even played this year, which he wouldn't. He would be stashed for 2026, maybe 27. And by that point, how much older is he getting? So like, if you stash a young player, yeah, like it makes sense because like you have years to go. But Gabriel's already older. He has a ton of experience in college football already. So I think that he's a guy that maybe he goes to a team and he gets some reps early for a team that like needs a quarterback support. Like maybe the Browns draft him. You know what I mean? And maybe the Browns can offer him a little bit of action every now and then. I don't know. So, there are a couple teams that could use a quarterback maybe even the Saints is a team. So we'll see what happens with Gabriel. But, he hasn't been on my list. And I don't think the Giants, we've heard nothing connecting them to Gabriel. So maybe that's a reason to think they are connected. Or maybe it's, usually when it comes to the Giants, the players that we hear they're connected to, they actually end up drafting half the time. So I think in this case, I'm going to run with the narrative that like the Giants probably aren't that interested in because we haven't heard a single thing connecting them. But you never know. You really don't, especially if the Giants are trying to cover up their tracks in the quarterback situation like they've been. You never really know at this point, but we're going to find out in about a week.
Well, that we definitely are. We might find out a week from today if they like Dillon Gabriel because he's probably going to get drafted on day 3. And a week from today will be day 3 of the NFL draft. And we'll probably be live in some estimation for day 3, but I can guarantee you we'll be alive on day 1 and day 2 of the NFL draft. So definitely stay tuned to that. And stay tuned on Monday. We're going to have another 3-round mock draft for you guys. And then on Wednesday, the eve of the NFL draft, get ready for our official mock draft special, the big episode that I know you're all waiting for. When we do our 7-round mocks, we're going to have special guests as well. And we've got an additional little segment for the end of that video that you will want to tune in for, and you'll want to stick around. It's going to be really different. It's going to be unlike anything you've ever seen on the Fireside Giants channel, but it's going to be exciting, and I can't wait. I'm going to go ahead and get that filmed over the coming days and then put it all together for Wednesday. So we got a lot of great content as we are now finally in the home stretch here, moving into the NFL draft just a few days away from Wrecking Day. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. So as we wrap this thing up, Alex, Forza Napoli, they just scored a goal over Monza, and now they're in the driver's seat to get the 3 points today. I'm excited. I'm going to go ahead and tune into that now once we get off the live here, but appreciate everybody who did tune in. Thank you so much. We had a great conversation about quarterbacks, running backs, the NFL draft in general. It's going to be an exciting week coming up here, and you don't want to miss a single thing that we're going to be posting or live streaming here on Fireside Giants, because again, we've got so much great content planned from Monday through Wednesday, and then that Thursday through Saturday during the draft. You're going to want to be here for all those live streams. So again, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss a live stream or an upload. Make sure to comment your thoughts down below if you're watching the live stream replay, and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.